170, 170. Nays call, 168, 163.
Je déclare la motion adoptée.
All right, election avoided. The Carney government passed its first budget on Monday with a vote of 170 to 168. After a week of some uncertainty and some drama, 2 NDP MPs abstained, as did 2 Conservatives who did not vote, while Green Party leader Elizabeth May was the only opposition MP to vote with the Liberals. And the Bloc Québécois leader had a pointed warning for the Liberal minority government.
They were not good partners for anybody. They exploited the momentary weaknesses of everybody, and this is not how policy should be done. So I believe it will come bite their ass.
All right, that's the sort of language you never hear from the reporter roundtable we've got with us today. Joël Denis-Bellevance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. Sherelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times, and Bob Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. Good to see you all. JD, the budget goes through, but there's some ruffled feathers on the opposition benches, right? In that they didn't feel listened to as they tried to get some changes, and Mark Carney seems to have won a staring contest.
Yeah, and he won this time, but I don't think I would use the same strategy next time around. There's a vote of confidence. Mr. Blanchet's words, I'm trying to translate that in French, what he said in English. It's pretty fascinating. That's pretty tough language, but he's right. The opposition parties are frustrated with the government, the way they acted. It was a take it or leave it budget, and they feel that this is not what Canadians elected, the election results get provided Parliament with. It's a minority government that should talk to opposition parties, not impose them their visions as a take it or leave it. Next spring, 2 things will have happened. Pierre Poilievre will have had his vote of confidence in his leadership review. Yeah. And the NDP will have a new leader. So the NDP leader might be more, more willing to fight a budget or any vote of confidence. So the dynamics will change, and I think that tape of Mr. Blanchet should be played once at least in Mr. Carney's office.
Well, yeah, we played it for Steve McKinnon, Stephen McKinnon, the House Leader, the other day. Charles, he goes, I can't believe we use that kind of language on a family show. But, we do see these claims from opposition MPs. Elizabeth May dropped the budget on the floor and stomped on it on Parliament Hill, and then she stood up and voted for it on the same Parliament Hill. So, I mean, what does this really tell us about the balance of play and balance of power in this minority parliament?
Well, kind of tells you that everybody's kind of tired. It's been a very long year.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing that tiredness play out. And as JD just said, the Prime Minister cannot bank on that being the case next year. He cannot bank on that being the case in 6 months. He can't bank on that being the case in March. There is no real buy-in on this budget. You didn't really have, Elizabeth May voted for this budget because she got the Prime Minister to stand up in question period and say that he was going to respect Canada's past commitments to the Paris Agreement. She didn't really have a reason, aside from the exhaustion that everybody has already felt and everybody's expressing. The NDP are saying, nobody wants an election. Flat out, we don't believe in this budget, but nobody wants an election. So you cannot say, in a few months that that's going to be good enough, because it's not. The country, as far as polling has shown, there's also not, tremendous, overwhelming support and buy-in for this budget. So if it had to get tested by the electorate in a scenario where everybody isn't just completely downtrodden by everything else that's going on, they might not be so willing to give them that second look.
But Bob, couldn't they all have just said that? We're too tired. Nobody wants an election at this point in time, so let's just live with this because it's broadly in line with what they were elected.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. They should have been much more honest with Canadians and saying, look, we just had an election 7 months ago. We don't agree with this budget, and we're going to vote against it, but we're not going to defeat the budget. That would have been more honest and more realistic, because we all knew that was going to happen. Yeah. This was a fake, pretend, let's bring the government down. You have the case of Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid hiding behind the
Can I just show, sorry, I have to show this. So this was like Zapruder film level of scrutiny, right? So you can see right there in that monitor, you can see there's a person there with a beard that people believe is Scott Reid. Well, and that suit matches the color of, the color of many men's suits in this town, but of the one that Andrew Scheer was wearing that day. But Bob, Andrew Scheer's office told us that wasn't him. It wasn't Scott Reed. They were legitimately away. I don't know.
They weren't legitimately away. They were behind. They were in the opposition lobby or behind the curtain, and there's no reason, and the House should not allow members who are in the House of Commons to say that they're voting electronically. Get into the House where you are and vote. And clearly what they were doing is they're waiting, doing the count, and if it looked like the government was going to go down, they were going to stay there and not vote. And when they realized the government was going to safely get through this, they ran into the House and demanded to have their vote. I totally agree with you that all the parties would have been much more honest with the public and just saying, we don't like the budget, but we're not going to defeat the government. Next time around, I think everybody here has made valid points that the government may have to negotiate more the next time, but maybe not. Because
that's what I wonder.
I mean, he's got a 25% lead over Pierre Poilievre. The Liberal Party is not necessarily the Liberal Party is not ahead of, or it's slightly ahead of the Liberals, but this is a government where people are putting their faith in Mark Carney. And there's no reason in the world why he necessarily has to do much negotiating. If you want to bring me down, we'll come back perhaps with a majority government. I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but they do have room to play that game.
Yeah, look, when the Liberals and the Conservatives are tied broadly, the vote efficiency delivers the most seats to the Liberals. But when the gap on the leaders is that large, it's majority potential, if not majority for sure. Right. And, JD, whoever was behind the curtain, right? Greg McEachern said they went from measuring the drapes to hiding behind them. It shows the great lengths everyone was ready to go to avoid this election. And I don't know if that would have been an issue for the Conservatives that they weren't immediately going on social media saying the budget passes with the NDP and the Green support, and really it was the Green and the Matt General and Shannon Stubbs abstentions that did it before Don Davies and his crew ever got up.
Everybody except the Bloc Québécois contributed.
Exactly. Mr. Blanchet was serious when he said it.
So that's why he used that kind of language he's used that we cannot use on this set. But truly, everybody, there was nobody, it was in nobody's interest to have an election. And guess what, David? They changed the budget cycle. It's a minority government. So that means they will...
Every Christmas.
Exactly.
I know.
We'll have that debate.
I aged thinking about that the other day. It came to me in real time talking to Don Davies. We're going to go through this every year.
Every year, are we going to defeat the government in November to have an election on Christmas Day or between the 25th of December and the 1st of January? That's going to be the debate we have every fall. So what we say now, we could probably play the tape next year again on this one, but it's going to be part of the political dilemma. Are we forcing an election at the time when people are thinking about something else on the holiday season? And my sense is that the answer will be no all the time. So my expectation is that if there's an election to be forced upon Canadians, it's going to be done in a way that it's in the spring or maybe late spring, early summer.
Yeah, for the fiscal cycle, the budgeting idea makes some sense. For the political cycle, it's exhausting.
Because we have winter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Sherelle, I wonder, though, what do you think? Are we going to see a change in approach from this government? Because I'm not sure, right? I've read some criticism that this is an amateurish approach by the Carney government. I don't know if it is or not, but he seems to have recognized a strategic battlefield he's playing on in Parliament, and they went with we are not changing on this. And nobody kind of got anything other than Liz Mayo got a verbal commitment to pre-existing commitments, right, which didn't fundamentally, and then they talk about a pipeline with Alberta.
Well, look at the background that Mark Carney is coming from in terms of like the private sector background. He's used to talking to CEOs. He's used to getting things done. He's used to not having to do the political gamesmanship, and it's used to saying, "I'll sit down with you. You sit down with me. We'll hash this out, and we'll find a way forward." It's not quite the same. It sounds like that should be how Parliament should work, but it's not quite the same. So he's used to getting his way, ostensibly. Yeah. And yes, there is a whole House of Commons there's 342 other MPs, but that doesn't really matter. And everything that we've seen so far is that he is very confident in his plan, in his approach, and in his belief of how things should be. He can be flexible. I mean, he used to be very all in on, things like climate carbon pricing and things like that. But now that it no longer serves for the business objective that he's trying to get to, he's willing to let that go. So I don't know if we're going to necessarily see a change of approach unless it really starts to hurt. Because right now, so far, all he's got is another MP who's joined his team.
Right. No, look, they threw the consumer carbon price overboard, but the industrial price, if the budget is to be believed, is going to be the spine of what they try to do on climate. And look, Bob, one of the other news stories consuming Ottawa this week, it started with your story that a memorandum of understanding between Ottawa and Alberta that could clear the way for a pipeline, theoretically, to BC's coast is closed. Have a listen to some of the reaction on that.
The Prime Minister fully understands and has the same sense of urgency that I do. We both are very keen to get a memorandum of understanding, but we'll know in a few more days.
We want to grow more agricultural products as well as expand our market access for oil. So we've been part of those discussions and very supportive of Alberta's position.
This is a broadside attack on an oil tanker ban that is the foundation of economic growth mapped out for the entire country for the foreseeable future.
Bob, are they working on an MOU with British Columbia? Because David is unaware of one and said, you know, this is Danielle Smith's doing this because she's in trouble at home. I mean, there was fighting words from him earlier today.
Well, I'm a little stunned that David he says he didn't know that they were talking about a pipeline to the Pacific West. Well, that's the whole point of the discussions.
I think what he didn't know was like how far advanced the MOU was, what it contained, and the fact that apparently Scott Moe is part of these talks. Because the Premier of Saskatchewan said,
yeah,
a lot of us
that Scott Moe was part of that.
Yeah.
That is for sure. That was new to us. But I mean, first of all, everybody knew that because the Premier had come out days before to say, hey, we're making really good progress. And we're hoping to get something. If it's not by Grey Cup, which it didn't happen, we hope to have it by her convention that's going to happen next weekend. So it's not as if they didn't know. And if the Premier of British Columbia says he didn't know anything about this, why didn't he pick up the damn phone and call the Prime Minister? Or doesn't he have anybody in this caucus that can go and find out for him about this? But leaving all that aside, this is a smart move on the federal government, if it happens, because what they're doing is they do not want Danielle Smith coming out and hammering Ottawa.
Right.
So what they're saying is if you could, we'll consider a pipeline if you can get a private sector person behind it, if you meet these environmental standards, including pathways, and we will consider a partial lifting of the tanker ban if you get all of these things in place, which is a big if. Then we'll consider doing this, which is very unlikely is going to happen. But in another way, it also sends a message to the international community that Ottawa is open to resource development, and it's not going to stand in the way. Meanwhile, they played a fairly good chess game because all of a sudden the British Columbia government comes along and says, "Okay, we'll triple
do TMX,
the TMX capacity, and we'll dredge the port of Vancouver for what?
Yeah,
big tankers to come in.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
well,
kind of a win-win for.
Yeah, it's more open sea than the channels up north. But yes, and that is an interesting shift there. But JD, the tactics of it all are very interesting, right? That in some ways this will call the question on a pipeline. If the Prime Minister and Danielle Smith have an agreement, okay, emissions cap's a problem, it's gone under these conditions. This is a problem, gone under these conditions. So go get your proponent and let's see the private capital.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, I think, that the federal government will launch to Danielle Smith. But coming back to what Bob said, I think it's very important. It was a wise move. They're playing sort of firefighter, trying to extinguish before it comes ablaze a potential national unity crisis related to pipelines. There's there was a little blaze that could have been erupted in a bigger fire because Madame Smith is making the case that if I don't get a pipeline, that means the federation doesn't work. So the federal government is trying to show that they can work, but you've got some homework to do, and that's wise because there's another fire that possibly could be erupt in Quebec. So you don't want to have two national crises at the same time. Extinguish this one and then deal with the other one next year.
It's interesting, Sherelle, the tactics they're employing here is, okay, you say we're the impediment, let's remove the impediments. Now, go do it. And it reminds me of what we saw on sort of, and bear with me here, the justice reform stuff we're seeing, the bail reform. All the premiers have been hammering Ottawa with brickbats about bail reform. They run the courts, the prisons, and public defenders and crown attorneys, and there's not enough of them. So they're going to change the federal laws and say, back to you, premiers, to staff up and fund your justice systems. They're removing the excuse is what seems to be a big part of the plays here.
I mean, as they should. I do agree that there is always that conversation about, oh, nobody cares about jurisdiction. Everybody just wants to get things done. But jurisdiction does matter because things have to get done a certain way. They have jobs. They're not just there to, represent their province in Washington or Mar-a-Lago or wherever they happen to go. And that push behind jurisdiction, premiers get real hoity-toity about the federal government coming in and doing what they think is things that are outside of the scope of what the federal government can do. But yet when they want something, it's, hey, federal government, why aren't you doing this? Even though it is very much well within their own wheelhouse to do it. But the whole conversation about, BC not being part of these discussions, that apparently Saskatchewan is a part of. There's what's that phrase? The West wants in, and as somebody who grew up in British Columbia, who always says, is like, when people talk about the West, and it's like, the West doesn't stop at the Rocky Mountains. I'm sure you feel the same way when you say
from Vancouver to Halifax, it's a great country. They were massive. Labrador's bigger than all of it.
Well, there was a greght columnist named Alan Fotheringham called BC Lotus Land, which is different than Western Canada.
It's the political Narnia of Canada when you dive right down into it. But, I wonder about this, because Bob, yes, David Eby, obviously we are conversations on a pipeline, but the fact that Mo was involved in all these things and it's not going, Saskatchewan oil and gas could end up in it, but it's not going through Saskatchewan. This is a potential flashpoint at the First Minister's table, though, right? Yes, maybe Mark Carney is navigating things rather well with Daniel Smith. But if David Eby is mad and then Eby and Smith start getting into a fight, we go back to the Horgan-Notley, situation, and that can be a difficult thing with all of these economic plays.
Federal-provincial relations are very complicated, and it doesn't matter which prime minister, you face provinces and premiers who will get in your face, and you've got to navigate that. And I think we were facing a national unity crisis with Daniel Smith. And the government is trying to figure a way to neutralize her anger, so that she doesn't go out and start saying Ottawa standing in the way of West being able to get a pipeline. And even though there's no theoretically any pipeline that may ever get built, but also I think he has to also send a message to the international investors that this is a different government. It wants corporates, companies from around, or investors from around the world to come in and invest in energy and mining and all these other things. And we want to send a message that we're not going to stand in the way of that. But you have to meet conditions, particularly First Nations. They have to have a buy-in on that. Clearly, there has to be they have to meet environmental standards, which as long, it doesn't care how, the Prime Minister doesn't seem to care how you arrive at it as long as the emissions come down.
So, JD, this is what I wonder about, right? The TMX pipeline was a tough sell to the Trudeau caucus, but they did it for a bunch of reasons. Can Mark Carney, he convinced Stephen Guilbeault to support the end of the consumer carbon tax because of other measures. Can he get Mr. Guilbeault? Can he get Karina Gould? Can he get some of these members of the Environmental Caucus to stick with him if another oil pipeline happens up there?
That's going to be the challenge, keeping Western Canada from, erupting into a national crisis, but also keeping the Liberal caucus united. And, because of Mr. Carney's changes of some climate change policies, there's a environment caucus within the Liberal Party that was put together just to sort of watch what Mr. Carney is doing. And I'm sure that Mr. Guilbeault is very much aware of that caucus, that is like the Auto caucus within the Liberal Party, is very much active in trying to watch what Mr. Carney is doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if that pipeline sees the light of day under this government. Mr. Guilbeault will be exiting the door.
Cheryl, we got about 60 seconds left. I mean, what's your sense of, look, there's disagreement in every kind of a caucus, but for some of the old Trudeau era members, this is a tough one, it seems.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, there's already, well before this, there was already those discussions about who was going to be heading out the door. There were already a few handful of names of people who are going to be on their way out, and there could be, and that list could grow simply because if people continue to feel like they're not being heard, they don't want to work under, CEO Carney, then they're going to have to find a different method of trying to make a difference in the country.
Yeah, but Bob, in 10 seconds, nothing holds the Liberal Party together like power.
You said it all. All these people who are complaining or to us, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Mark Carney.
They loved the carbon tax until they had to get rid of the carbon tax. It would have been Prime Minister
Pierre Poilievre.
All right, I don't know if they're going out the door, but we're going out the door because the time is over, the show is over. I want to thank the Reporter Roundtable, Robert Fife, Sherelle Evelyn, and Joelle Denis Bellavance.